And then there's also states where, where the tenant boards and the are more angled towards the landlords, where if someone doesn't pay you, you actually can just kick them out.
All right. Gillian Irving.
Gary, it's so good to be back.
It is good to see you again. It's been a while. It's been a while.
It's been a really long time.
Well, we've done this before, though.
We have, but I feel like it was a really long time ago. We're due for a good catch-up.
Yeah. Did you do a studio with me, or was it when I was doing it over Skype?
I think over Skype.
Yeah, yeah. I don't even know if people even use Skype anymore.
I don't think so.
We are aging ourselves.
We are. Many things age me at this moment, but that's one of them. Anyway, good to be here with you today.
Yeah, it is. It is. And life is good. Family's good.
Life is great. No complaints. Kids are all doing well, graduating from university, working. I have one that's fully launched. I mean, it's pretty great.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. And, we both kind of started in the investing world around the same time. I started in 2008. When did you start?
2009 was my first purchase. Yeah.
Okay. So you saw what I was doing. You're like, let me follow that Gary Haber guy, right?
That's right. Like, I want a piece of what he's doing.
Yeah. But anyways, listen, again, I'm excited to have you here. I want to kind of dive into your story, and I've got like two segments that I want to have with you.
Okay, great.
The first one, though, I want to dive into U.S. investing, because obviously things have changed from when we first got into real estate investing to where the market is now. Very different, very difficult. Single family homes, when we did it, single family homes worked. Like, you can buy a single family home all day and they just all worked.
Yeah.
You did a lot of student rentals in the beginning as well, too.
Yeah, I did. That was kind of my niche. So if a single family worked, then a student rental worked, kind of like magnified, right?
Yeah.
So
it was like on steroids.
Exactly.
For sure. But I want to dive into what you're doing right now, which is more like on the U.S. investing side. And I think Canadians are now looking into that market, or they have been now for a while. But before we get into it, maybe just a little bit about what you're doing right now. You've gotten into mortgages, and then why are people going to the U.S.?
Right. So I've been in mortgages for several years now. It made sense as I started investing with partners and we were buying more properties together. It just kind of made more sense that I understood sort of the full scope of everything. I couldn't control sort of all the verticals in that business. So, so I've been in mortgages for a long time, and I kind of feel like as a long-term investor, all investors are sort of into mortgages anyway, because you're always looking at rates and angles and ways in which you're going to try to make your next deal work. So after the first few, like, everyone has to start thinking sort of outside of the box. So I've been in investment in mortgages for a long time, but residential mortgages since like 2020. And what I've noticed I would say like in the past 2 years or 18 months, there's been a real kind of energetic shift that I've noticed of people saying, like, it's not working in Ontario for me anymore. And there's a lot of friction points here. There's like the prices. People are like, wow, I just can't afford to buy, an $800,000 house. Like, even if the numbers work, the price tag is too high.
Right. So you still got a hefty down payment you got to come up with.
Well, exactly. You have to come up with like this sizable down payment. The prices are high. And then, of course, there's the sort of systematic constraints, which is the landlord tenant board here. Like, if you want to do business in Ontario, you have to remember that if your primary revenue generator, like your rent, stops, you actually as a business owner don't have like tons of control about that until you make your way through the landlord tenant board, which can be slow. And I know things are improving, but it's really tough. So I've noticed just a lot of sort of pushback to these combined elements, saying like, wow, it's really expensive and the numbers don't work and the interest rates are high. And if I do, I can't get my tenant out if they don't pay. So what's the solution to that? And they're looking to the States, where, first of all, there's a sea of markets. And if your budget is smaller, there's houses that you can buy that start with the number 1. You can buy
crazy.
$100,000 house. You can buy a $200,000 house. So there's every which range. And then there's also states where, where the tenant boards and the are more angled towards the landlords, where if someone doesn't pay you, you actually can just kick them out and you start fresh. So a lot of people are saying from a straight business perspective, 1, I don't need as much capital. 2, I can count on my rent coming in. And if it doesn't, I can at least get a new renter. So they're saying like, I've had enough, or it's too hard to do it here, or it's easier elsewhere. So I just want to go look to the States.
Yeah. Okay. So those are all great points. So now I'm like, okay, I want to maybe start exploring, maybe looking into the States. Where do you start, or what state should I start with? Because I mean, there's a lot of states.
So I would say this is from all of the people who reach out to me and who talk to me about U.S. mortgages. I find that, and again, you probably notice that here, working with investors in Ontario, there's a lot of people who are like, I'm super interested. Where do I sign up? Where do I go? And they just are tire kickers. They're like, in principle, they're interested, but they just don't get their act together. In this, when you have investors who want to invest in the States, we have that again magnified because the number of choices are literally infinite. You can invest anywhere. And so people are like, I want to invest in the States. And then they start digging and they're overwhelmed with choices. You're like, do I go to Ohio? Do I go to Kansas? Do I go to Arizona? Do I go to Texas? Do I go to California? Do I go to Florida? And then they're like, wow.
Literally. Yeah.
And so it becomes impossible so what I have always suggested to all investors is you need your check mark. Like, what is your criteria for investing in any market? Like, where do you start? You're going to start with the economic fundamentals. Where are the employers? Like, where are people working? Like, that's the most important thing because you need workers to pay the bills. Like, where is population growing? Where are the prices to rents optimized? And so you find a couple of markets and then stop looking. Like, do not keep looking because you're going to have shiny penny syndrome. And you're like, well, what about this market? What about that market? What about this market? Just use whatever your criteria is that you would use buying a property in any town in Ontario or BC or wherever you live. Find that and then zone in and then stop looking. Stop looking.
And as you were saying that just brought back flashbacks to me, us sitting in, these investment groups like RAIN or any of them that were very popular back in the days where it was this fundamental economics, infrastructure and job growth and population growth. And is it going up? Is it going down? And you're right. And it shouldn't take you more than 3 months. Would you say 3 months, do your homework, and then, okay, now dive in.
Dive in, but focus. I mean, look, you cannot have shiny penny syndrome. If you want to buy a single family home, don't start looking at duplexes.
Right.
Don't start looking at rent to owns. Don't do wholesaling. Find whatever strategy it is, zone in on your market, pay attention, lock in. And it really should not take you that long. And, so some of the key questions I think about now when you think about, like, if I were trying to find a new market in the States, so it's what employers like. I would follow AI as a narrative. So where are the data centers going? Where are the power, the power centers going? They're going to be building so much infrastructure around that narrative. So follow the jobs, follow the money, like whatever industry it is that you want to use as your guiding light. But
now, are there any particular states that you personally like? Do you want to get into that?
Well, like, again, I don't think it's about what I like. Again, it's everybody's needs are different. Some people, a lot of people want to stick to the border towns. I've got a lot of Detroit, a lot of Ohio investors because they feel like that's easy. They don't want something that's super far away,
and just in case they got to drive.
Just in case they got to go there. So some people want proximity. Some people don't care. So my investing goals would not be your investing goals. My capital abilities are not yours. So really, everyone's goals between me, you, and anyone else are going to be completely different. So figure out what you want and then just zone in on
and
that.
Sometimes if it's further away as well too, now you really have to rely on your team, and now you're big on systems and processes, and if you can get that figured out correctly, then you don't need to be that close to it.
Exactly. But these are not any different skills than if you were investing here in Canada. Like you figure out who your core team is, whether that's your property manager, your plumber, your finance person, and all of that. You get that in place, and then you're good to go. It's no different.
Right.
I would say the one thing that you really do need to figure out before you start shopping in the States is you have to set up a buying structure. So this is a mistake that I see a lot of investors making. You need to talk to a cross-border accountant. They'll help you set up a structure that will protect you from like double taxation and liability and all of that. But then you have to make sure you run that structure by me, someone who knows US mortgages, because sometimes what your accountant wants is not necessarily optimized for financing. And some lenders might like what your advisor suggests and other lenders might not. So making sure that you're optimized for both before you get started is super important.
Right. Yeah. And I think sometimes what ends up happening as well too is that, and I know that as a real estate investor, you go to an event and there's somebody on stage, an accountant or a lawyer, and they're giving you these ideas and these tips and these strategies. And then you want to implement them all. But really, you've got to sit down with your core team of your mortgage agent and your accountant and your lawyer to make sure that it suits what you're trying to do, as opposed to doing somebody who may already have 30 doors. And you're like, well, do you really need to set up a 3-tier corporation? Because it's not cheap to do that stuff either,
it's not necessarily cheap. And not only that, but in some cases, if you have too many layers and too much complexity, US lenders won't lend to you. So if it's too complicated and too many layers, it limits their recourse. Like, remember, you're a Canadian citizen, so they just want to be able to get recourse to their loans if stuff goes sideways. So so yeah, it's important. You're right. That's exactly. You just have to make sure that you double check what your accountant says with what the lender says. Because if you're optimized for taxes, but you still can't get a mortgage, then you're no further ahead than when you started. Right?
Okay, so walk me through the process now. So I figured it out. I'm like, I'm going to invest in bleep state. I'm not going to say a state.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever state it is. And now I come to you and I'm like, okay, so what do I do next? Am I getting lending from a bank up here in Canada, or am I going to the US? Like, how does that all work?
Okay, that's a great question. So first of all, you will have your conversation with your cross-border tax person going on at the same time. So you just want to make sure you're initiating that you have someone at least who you can talk to get your entity set up should you need to. Yep. Then you come to me and say, Gillian, I think I'm ready to go. Me and my accountant have set up the entity that I need. I've gone over it. I make sure it's good. And then we have access to a huge database of lenders in the States. And what makes US lending so different from Canada is they don't care what your income is. They don't care what your credit score is. They look at it like they're only underwriting the property. So these are called DSCR loans. So they're basically just looking at the strength of the property. It has nothing to do with your income.
And DSCR loan, what is that?
Debt service coverage ratio. Okay. So they just want to make sure that the property pays for itself. And so do you as an investor, by the way. So if a property doesn't pay for itself and the lender says we're not going to lend, that's actually a pretty good sign that it's a bad property, right? So if you've picked a property where the income is greater than the expenses, you will get a loan on it in the States. So that's really all they need.
Which is great, because then at least now it's almost like you got a second pair of eyes that's looking at the property for you, saying, we're not lending on this property because it's not good.
It's not going to work. Right. And then furthermore, then you can use the interest rate that you get is also another guide. So interest rates are a reflection of risk. They are everywhere, right? So, so if you use a private lender here in Canada, for example, rates are higher because the risk is higher. Well, the same is true in the States. DSCR loans are typically more expensive than what you would think of a residential rental mortgage here in Canada. And the reason why is because, well, of course, you don't work there. You don't have a credit there. So they price the loan a little bit more expensive. And if the debt coverage is kind of weaker, like the interest rate will go up a little bit too. So you'll get a great rate or a much stronger rate if your property is a good performing property, because it reduces the overall risk on it. So it really behooves you to make sure you find a property that has great numbers, because it will benefit you in terms of rate in the end as well. So an investor here in Canada, we were talking just before we started about how, lenders overturn every single rock in your whole entire life as they're trying to approve you for a mortgage. You basically have to sign in blood. They know everything about you.
DNA,
every dollar
you're giving kids away.
Yes, every dollar you've earned in the past 20 years, you have to account for. And where is that? And it's on your T1. And but in the States, and then of course, once you have bought a number of property, then your ratios just stop working and it gets harder and more complicated here. But in the States, it doesn't work that way at all. It's a fundamentally different way to think about access to capital. So yes, you have to have some funds to put in for your down payment, but you could literally buy 50 properties. They look at each one individually. As long as each one covers itself and it's set up, you're on to the next one. There's no ratios, there's no caps, there's no maximum. They just want to make sure that each property functions well, and if so, they'll keep giving you mortgages under this.
Because that was always a difficult thing up here, right? Was we got to 5 doors, and okay, most of these major banks don't even want to touch us anymore. So now you got to try and look, CIBC's got some program here. Oh, okay, no, it's no longer gone. And you're always trying to maneuver to try and grow your portfolio. But it sounds like it's completely different. It's completely different. US.
Yeah. So again, it's all about how you access capital, how they look at capital. They're looking at the property, not you. And so that's a big relief to a lot of people. Now, if you have a huge income here, there are some lenders where we can add that in if we want to, but that's just sort of gravy, right? Mostly it's just the property and how it performs.
Right. And what type of loan to value are you typically getting?
Again, I know it's going to sound, I'm going to say this 1,000 times in this podcast because I'm well, it depends. So remember, here in Canada, we have a handful of lenders that most investors would go to. So you're the terms and are very tight and limited. Whereas in the States, literally there's a lender at every single corner. And so everyone has a slightly different, terms and programs. So I'll say that the down payment can range between 25% and 35%.
Okay.
So they want a little bit more. Yeah. But again, when you're talking about a $200,000 property or a $300,000 property, again, that number just feels better.
A lot more manageable, right? Yeah. I mean, you're talking about, maybe 30,000 to 60,000. As opposed to here, you're dropping 160, 180,000. It doesn't take long. And then if you got to do some renovations, sometimes you're $250,000 into it.
Well, this is it. So, that's the beauty is that it's a big country with a zillion markets that might slow you up to get you started. But once you do and you have your market and you're operating and you have your buy box, it's really firmly established. This is what I can afford. This is the house I'm looking for. Yeah. I have the capital to do 2, 3, 4 of these. Then you're off to the races, right?
And then what about ownership? How does that work? Is it in my name? Am I putting it in trust? Are there different ways of doing it?
So again, you'll have a buying structure, like an entity set up before you purchase. So we almost never recommend that you buy in your personal name. So you would have a U.S. corporate structure set up to buy the property. So you're not owning it in your personal name. It would be held in either a limited partnership or an LLC in the States, depending on your particular circumstances. LLCs are easier. But yeah, so you have to set that up in advance.
How hard is it to set up a team down there?
A team?
Yeah.
Look, it's not any different than it is here. I mean, with the internet and AI and whatnot, you literally can be pointed to your experts pretty easily. And I think a lot of investors I know try to find the equivalent of a Facebook group or some sort of online community where investors are doing a similar thing. And then you can start kind of using the collective hive, right? To identify who are the good contractors, who's the plumber, who's the good property management company. And usually with a little bit of effort that they reveal themselves pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right?
And the thing too now with the day and age that we live in and the internet and reviews and groups on Facebook, and it's so much more easier than it was, say, 15 years ago.
100%.
So it's definitely easier.
Yeah. So I think once you've decided that this, it's actually a fairly easy strategy, but you just have to have the will to kind of see it through to the end, right?
So you've seen obviously some success with a lot of the investors that have moved from Canada. Well, not moved, but like started investing from Canada into the US. What are some of the mistakes that you see maybe beginning or even experienced investors make when they move down and shift into the US?
I haven't seen a ton of like big egregious errors yet. Well, I would say most what I hear from some investors, because the prices are so inexpensive in some of like the border town markets like Cleveland and Detroit and stuff, some people are like, okay, well, I'm going to turn into a flipper. You're like, okay, well, okay, you can do that. And I think people learn a lot of hard lessons by thinking that that's necessarily an easy thing. Right. Now, mind you, I guess the good news about getting your first flip wrong, if you do, or you make an error, you budget wrong, is that your downside is pretty limited when your property is $65,000 or $75,000 or whatever that price is. So I think I hear of budgeting problems, but I mean, look, that's the number one sort of downfall of any flipper really is not knowing your numbers properly. So it's the same there.
And I bet the market in some of these areas as well too, they're not as hot. Like, like during like our peak, like, you flip a property easily, but they probably maybe take a little bit longer to move down there.
Again,
depending on the market, obviously, and the location. And
there's some markets, and I think and again, it depends on what strategy you want to follow. I've got plenty of people who want to do flips, and we can talk about the mechanics of the flip loans too, because they're super interesting as well. Or whether you want to do a long-term buy and hold. It's just easier than ever to do the research that you need to do to figure out if a market is where you want to be, how long you want to be there for, what you think the trajectory for growth is going to be. And then, settling on a market that you think, I mean, again, no one has a crystal ball, but settling on a market that you feel is poised for sort of stronger growth than another one. But you're right. I mean, there's not a real estate market. There's markets of real estate, as we know from Canada too. Some markets will do great and adjoining ones will not do well for whatever reason, or even some streets in certain towns don't do as well as others or areas, some markets. So
it's actually cool down there as well too. And I don't remember which, so if you were to sell a property, so you own a property down there for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and you're like, you know what? I bought a few properties now. That one's not really doing well in my portfolio. I want to sell it. Do you know, or can you touch on this in regards to being able to then sell that property
and buy
another one?
Yeah.
Is it a bill or is it I can't remember what it is that covers that or a tax form?
There's a tax a tax loophole. It's not even a loophole. It's used by lots of investors. Where you can roll your capital gains into another investment. So you don't pay capital gains on.
How long? Do you remember?
I don't know. And I want to be careful too, because I'm not exactly sure how that rule applies to foreign nationals doing the same thing. I certainly know Americans can and do use that regularly as a way of keeping their capital moving quickly. Like they rotate from one asset to another and they can just keep their gains growing without ever realizing anything. Oh my gosh, how great would that be?
Exactly. Because now, what I get out of it and somebody else can get in there and they can start and, and you're actually getting investors involved in moving the market around, updating those properties that maybe just needed a little bit more love, but you 100%. Keep the market moving. Move markets that move, or let the market do what it needs to do.
Exactly. And then of course you think about the impact that would have on the dollar value of your initial investment. Like if you never had to stop, pay tax, so you go back 30 or 40% here in Canada, and then you're starting again, growing from there, and you stop again, pay the money, and your number goes down. But if you could just keep rolling that over, then the compounded growth would be so much bigger. It's a great tax incentive, if you ask me. I just don't know whether Canadians have access to it in the same way that U.S. citizens do. Okay. So that's something
So
we'd
if
have
you listen to this, then do your homework. Don't listen to us.
And if you can do it, do it.
It just sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. If you can do it, do it. It would be great. Yeah.
Any other tips or any other strategies about investing in the US that
Well, so I find that we have two kind of streams of investors who come to us, who come to me for advice. We have people who want to just buy long-term buy and hold properties, and that's great. And we have people who are like, well, I don't have a ton of money. How do I get started? And there's kind of fix and flip loans that allow you to get started in the market without a ton of money. So the mechanics are that they'll lend to you up to 85% of the after repair value. So imagine you bought a property for $200,000 and you had to put $50,000 in, and it would appraise for $300,000. Like, I'm just making this up. These numbers could be completely wonky, but well, they'll give you a loan for 85%. That's $255,000, right?
Of the
300.
Really?
Yeah. And so they'll give you the $50,000 for your renovation and draws, and then you're left with $205,000, which is more than your purchase price. However,
so you're getting a contractor to go in there to then be able to, do their drawings and assessment of the property?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, you have to give them like sort of what the projection is.
Right. Yeah. And how you got there.
Mm-hmm. So before anyone gets like super excited at the idea that they're going to give you money to do a flip, the sort of been there, done that of zero money down is finished. So even if you have a great lift on your property and it looks like you could do this with no money in, you can never do a loan with zero money in. Every lender will want you to have some skin in the game. So if we say we have an ARV lender for 85%, you'll still have to put some money into your deal. But it's a great way to sort of build up your capital pool if you want, by doing like small flips, like making a little bit of money, and then using that for your long-term buy and hold as you move forward. So you gather them. You don't need a ton of capital money up front, because they'll give, if your ARV supports it, they'll give you that money in draws. So you don't need the renovation money. So it's a bit different than it is here in Canada too, where you need to...
It almost allows you to do the perfect BRRRR, or at least essentially like what your numbers are going to be before you even start.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then...
Would that be almost like the purchase plus improvement one, kind of somewhere along that line?
Yeah, it's similar. Yeah, it's similar.
Yeah.
But they'll give you more there.
Okay, that's good.
They'll give you more. And your purchase plus improvement, where you have to pay and then you submit your receipts and they pay you back. But there's lenders who will actually just give you the money in draws to pay for it. Some won't, some will.
And what strategy are you seeing a lot of?
Buy and holds. I think that's...
buy and hold. Single families, 2 units.
Well, there's a little bit of everything. Some people love the flips. They're really good at it. They buy a really inexpensive property. They make $25,000, but they do that 4 times in a year. They're like, boom, 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 rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Right. And that's what they do. And there's other people who have way bigger projects.
So you're seeing a lot of people doing this now.
I'm seeing... Yes, I'm seeing people do it. I hear a lot of people thinking about doing it. Again, I would say there's a lot of people who want to, but are become afraid.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, listen, even here, people want to do it. I've had investors in my database that I've talked to, and they come up to our seminars, and the same thing. Yeah. Same thing as well, too, right? To see it, and you know what? We're getting kind of the end here of the first show here, but it's the analysis paralysis. So why don't we touch on that in the next show? Yeah. And we'll continue the conversation.
Great. Okay, good.
All right, awesome.
Looking forward to it.